Well, good morning, everybody. I am Kate Dillon. I am one of the show organizers here at the Hickory Women's Expo. Thank you so much for joining us. And I am excited to announce our next speaker, someone who I've been able to connect with, multiple times here in the community. We're so lucky to have such smart, talented people in our area. So Rhonda, she is a professional genealogist, educator, and founder of Heritage with Heart. She has a diverse background, which includes uncovering family mysteries, organizing large family events, and reuniting adoptees with their birth families. That is so special. Today, she's doing a presentation helping us to break through barriers, and I'm really looking forward to announcing, and everybody's going to love the information, Rhonda Roederer. So let's welcome her to the stage.
Good morning, everyone. So, is everybody enjoying the show so far? How many of you were here yesterday? So, I recognize this lady, Carolyn, got to meet her, so I want to know more about you. So, everybody's got a very, very interesting life, that's for sure. Even though you think that you may not, guess what? You do. You just need to dig a little deeper. So, a little bit about me. It's going to be a little bit of a repeat. You got the secret of what my previous profession was. I've only been a professional genealogist for about 5 years now. I retired 5 years ago from the oil business, and I was a micropaleontologist. So I spent a lot of time out on drilling rigs, drilling platforms, drill ships, the whole bit. And so whenever I had downtime, I actually worked on my hobby, and my hobby was genealogy. And the reason why it became my hobby is because I did not know how important family history was until there was no one left to ask. And that's what happened to me because my mother died when I was 19 and my dad died when I was 22, only 2 weeks after I graduated college. So my hobby actually became my passion. And why did it become a passion? Well, it was because of the people that I met. Total strangers let me in their house, told me, feel free, spend the night. Opened up all of their family stories to me. Maybe not all of them, but some of them, things that they go, oh, I've never told my family this, and they just let it flow. And so it was those connections. Because I had a very, very small family. I did not really have family around me. And so these connections, guess what? I got to pick my own family. Sawed a couple of limbs off the tree. You can do that. So that is why genealogy is my passion. And that's how I turned geology into genealogy and started Heritage with Heart. So one of the things with this particular talk, it came to me because of what people told me. When I would tell them about my genealogy exploits, my adventures, as I like to call them, they said, you're crazy. What do you mean you went for a week just traveling in your car and stopping in all these cemeteries and knocking on strangers' doors? And you actually went to Germany and didn't even speak the language and you did that by yourself? Are you nuts? I kept hearing this where I started really questioning my own sanity. I truly did. And I'm like, why is it that I am having these people think that I am being reckless, that I'm having all of these obstacles, and I'm not seeing it? Well, what I believe was other people were seeing as an obstacle, I saw as an opportunity. That's the big difference. But I had to question, what is it? Why are people seeing these things as obstacles? So what is an obstacle? Well, when you look in the dictionary, it's going to tell you it's a thing that blocks one's way or prevents and hinders progress. Okay? Well, we can have all kinds of different obstacles. We can have physical, economic, time. How many is that an obstacle? I know you want to clone yourself, so as do I. Technological, I've had to break through a lot of those technological barriers. And so in my previous profession, all I needed was a microscope, a pen, and a pad. That was it. Cultural. So you got to look, if you're in another country or another area, sometimes cultural will be an obstacle. And the big one, psychological. I came from New Orleans 2 years ago. I lived there for 16 years. This site was common. I would come across these in like 10 miles. I would probably have about at least 5 of these. Did I turn around and go back home? No, I went around it. What about this one? No trespassing. Violators will be prosecuted. If I saw that, I'm like, what is it that they're afraid that I'm going to steal or damage or whatever? On that one, depending on the situation, I might just carry through. All right, if I had a physical disability or something, this would be a huge obstacle. And in my little adventures, I've come across many of these sort of things where you have a cemetery out in the middle of nowhere and a clump of trees or something. So that could also be a possible obstacle depending on your personal situation. What about this? I can make it to the fence in 2.5 seconds. What about you? That one might make me take pause. As much as I love dogs, that one I think I'll stay on my side of the fence. I can't believe how many people, when I have given this talk, are scared of bridges. Since I came from South Louisiana, if you were scared of a bridge, you might as well move, because you're gonna get a bridge somewhere. Is there anyone here in the room that is scared of bridges? No, this is the first time I've had nobody scared. You. Some bridges. Actually, this one in this picture, this one, even New Orleanians were scared of, because it was built in the 20s when you had those very narrow Model Ts, and they didn't expand it. So if you're in these bigger trucks and you've got something on the side of you, you were white-knuckled. Luckily, they have now expanded this, but that used to be a scary bridge, even for people that were not scared. What about this? What if you go into a cemetery to put flowers on your grandmother's grave, and there's no one in that cemetery except you and this guy? Would that affect your goal to put those flowers on your grandmother's grave? And if so, why? So what is fear? Is it really just false evidence appearing real? Think about that one. False evidence appearing real. Now, one of the things that I am absolutely terrified of are roaches. I can handle snakes, frogs, lizards, and handle them all day long. You show me a roach, even a dead one, and I start getting the heebie-jeebies. All right, is that false evidence appearing real? Yeah, that roach isn't gonna kill me. Might make me have a heart attack, but, so you gotta think about your fears. Is it false evidence appearing real? So what fears do you have? Fear of rejection? Feeling like you're not good enough? Failure? Being judged by someone in a negative way? Or just being alone? Are any of these fears of yours? There's a lady, Catherine Lumberg, that is coming on at 2 o'clock today, and her talk is just, it really embodies a lot of these fears that all of us have. And so it's called, How Can You Float When You Feel Like You're Drowning? And she spoke yesterday, and it was fabulous. So I highly recommend for you to go check that out at 2 today. But think about, all of us have fears. But could you be your own obstacle? Think about that. Could you be your very own obstacle because of those fears? So how do we work through obstacles? Well, I found some kind of interesting little tidbits through Pinterest. Obstacles are put in your way to see if what you want is really worth fighting for. So you have your goal. How much do you really want that goal? And I'm thankful for all those difficult people in my life. They have shown me exactly what I don't want to be. How many of us have those in our life, right? And when obstacles arise, you change your direction to reach your goal. You do not change your decision to get there. Just like that traffic cone. What did I do? I went around it. So just don't change your decision to get there. Find another way. So what I'm going to do is tell you about two particular family adventures that I had. And they spanned over 30 years, because it's going to make a difference. Because we have different obstacles today, or what we consider as obstacles, than we did 30 years ago. So we're going to just go back 4 years ago, and I was in search for my 3 times great-grandfather's cemetery. Actually, it really wasn't where he was buried, it was where his slaves were buried. I knew where he was and his family, but I knew he had slaves, not a whole lot of them, but when he died in 1856, his will had 6. And I wanted to find where were they buried. So I jumped in the car and drove to Ripley, Mississippi. So I had some really interesting events, okay? That was my goal. My goal was to find that family cemetery, that slave family cemetery. So I actually went to a museum two counties over in Marshall County. I had heard about this museum, so I went in and met this man, and after a while, after 3 hours, I realized there was nobody else in this building. He took me around. We went up 3 floors. We even went down in a basement. He was showing me all of these really neat artifacts that they had for Marshall County. And when I was telling him what I was there for, he says, you know what? I got a guy. I got a guy that I think can help you. He lives up in Memphis. He gave me his name and his contact information. And he says, why don't you call this guy and see if you can meet with him? So I did, and we're going to go through all of that. But then also on this trip, I also found myself not only with that man from Memphis, that I was alone with him for 2 hours. I was alone with this strange man in that museum for 3 hours. And then my next stop to reach my goal, I found myself alone again with another man for over 2 hours. That's 8 hours that I spent with 3 men that I had never met before. And you got to see whether you consider that an obstacle or an opportunity. So when I went to Memphis, earlier I had called the guy. I told him that Richard from the museum had given me his name, told him what I was interested in. He said, oh yeah, I can help you. He says, I'm doing this mapping project. Why don't you meet me at my office tomorrow and I'll show you what I've got. Great. So I drove for an hour up to Memphis, and then I come up, and it wasn't in the absolute best part of town, it didn't look like. But I'm thinking, all right, guess what? This is a public place. There's not going to be any problem here. So when I parked, I called him on the phone. I said, I'm here. He says, all right, I'll meet you at the door. So he opens up the door. We shake hands, come on in, and then he says, I'm going to lock the door to keep the desirables out. Do you have a problem with that? And I did see some undesirables out there. And I'm thinking, if I were by myself and walked into that building, I'd be closing the door. Okay, this man, I met him for like 5 seconds. That's it. So I'm like, okay, so I'm going to be on guard. I'm starting to kind of check my surroundings a little bit. So we go on, and he starts leading me down a very long, dark hallway. So I'm starting to look. It's like, okay, there's the exit. I saw how he locked the door. He turned it to the right. So if I need to make a run for it, I know run, turn it to the left, and run like hell. So all of this is going through my mind, but I don't want him to think that this is what's going through my mind. I'm just going to be aware. Okay, I've done a lot of traveling by myself. I'm not stupid. I'm still here. So you got to kind of trust your guts sometimes. So when he's, like I say, he's leading me down that, and he locks that door, I'm thinking, okay, all right, there were undesirables out. He's protecting me, right? And then I'm getting on guard again when he's leading me down that long, dark hallway. But guess what? We get to his office. He had 4 monitors up, and he had my family property from the 1850s marked out. Not only one family, but 2 families. And there it was, my 3 times great-grandmother, Sarah Llewellyn Land. This was right after her husband died. And then up in that top corner up here, that's her family. And then he tells me, he says, yeah, this mapping project, I'm doing 2 different counties. I'm doing Marshall County and Tippah County, and my family's in Tippah County. He goes, you want to know who owns that land now? There he pulls it up on his phone. He said, go talk to this guy. I'm like, wow. Not only did this guy have, this was in less than 15 hours of talking to him. So not only had he prepared all of this for me, he also had copied over an inch thick of both the tax records for Tippah County and for Marshall County. Color pages, also had it on a flash drive. And then you'll see this little piece of pottery. I said, what's this? He says, well, you told me that you had pots in your family, P-O-T-T-S. He says, I also had some pots. This is some pottery that came from Potts Land. This is a guy that I had only made like a 5-minute phone call telling him what I wanted, and in less than 24 hours, this is what he had for me. Total stranger. So what would have happened if once he locked that door that I'm like, dude, I'm out of here? Well, guess what? Obstacle or opportunity? I'd say it was one hell of an opportunity, and guess what? The gems just kept coming. So before I tell you a little bit more of the gems that he gave, so I'm going on to place number 3, when he had on the phone of where the people that own that property. So I'm gonna go knock on a stranger's door, right? Done it before, no problem. So I drive up and I'm like, well, that's a nice looking house. That's not too bad. So I go, this guy opens up the door, nice looking gentleman, and I tell him what I was there for. I showed him that little picture that I had of the land, and I said, this guy told me that you were the landowner. This used to be my family's land, and looking for a slave cemetery. Do you happen to know of anything like that? He said, oh yeah. He goes, it's back in the woods over there. Hop in the 4-wheel drive and I'll take you there. So here I am getting in with a stranger in a 4-wheel drive headed to the woods. Okay. Well, we had a few little barriers. We had some gates because there were some cows out there. So he gets out, he unlocks it, lets it through, locks it back. So I'm starting to be aware of my surroundings again. If this goes bad, I can drop and roll out of that 4-wheel drive. I may have to either crawl under or over that little thing and run like hell to my car. All of this is going through my mind. Am I going to let this guy know what's going through my mind? No, I have a goal. I have a goal, and I've spent a lot of time going towards this goal. So now we have another obstacle. We have a barbed wire fence surrounding that cemetery in the woods. What do you do then? Well, if you're me, you just crawl under it. And he was gentleman enough to actually even kind of hold it up so that I would be a little bit safer. But it was nice that he was there instead of just, oh yeah, here it is, have at it. You know, so he spent the time with me. Some people, that may have been another little fear of theirs, because there was no one around. I could scream bloody murder, no one would have heard me. And it was so, so neat. So here, this is what the markers a lot of times in slave cemeteries are. They're palmettos. That's what they used because they didn't have stones. Now, some of the slave descendants, they did have some stones there. But it was kind of sad because here, all of these markers, the few that were there, are just in the middle of some woods, totally forgotten. So then he tells me, he says, you know what? He goes, there's another cemetery. It's a real old cemetery you might be interested in. He goes, let me just see how I can explain to get there. Well, there's like a gravel road and a dirt road. He goes, it's going to be too difficult to tell you. He goes, why don't you just follow me there? So I hop in the car, and I'm going with this stranger, you know. So now I've known him for about 30 minutes, okay? So here you can see in this picture that it's starting to be sunset. So here I am going into a very deserted place with this semi-stranger now, headed for a cemetery. Well, he brings me to this. Sure enough, it happens to be my 3 times great-grandparents on the other line. I'm sorry, no, 4 times great-grandparents on that. So that Sarah Llewellyn, this was her family land that he had blocked off. So what made him even suggest that? You know, it was amazing to just open up a whole nother part of my family history that I didn't know. So obstacle or opportunity, let's look at some of the risks that I took, or what I perceived as risks. So I'm meeting a stranger at a country home. Well, it looked like a nice home, so I felt pretty comfortable with that. Tells me to get alone in the 4-wheeler with him, not a person in sight. Well, I'm going to be on guard and start thinking of exit strategies if things go south. There's a barbed wire fence. Well, I used caution. I was in proper clothing, had a denim jacket and jeans and everything, so I felt pretty comfortable with that. Well, what about snakes and stickers and chiggers and stuff like that? Well, I still felt like I had proper clothing in that. It was worth it for the goal if I did get a chigger or two. And then following a stranger to a remote cemetery, well, again, I'm on guard, but I'm feeling pretty comfortable, and it's like he introduced me to this just gold mine of information. Obstacle or opportunity? Well, I'd say I got a lot of opportunities there. And it goes even further. It went further because it reached this lady. This is one of the descendants of the slave of that William C. Llewellyn, my 3 times great-grandfather. I ended up tracking down 2 of the descendants of 2 different slaves. Now, he only had 6 slaves, and I was able to track down family from 2 of those. And Beverly Llewellyn Bevel was one of them. She happened to really be interested in genealogy as well. She lived out in California. And we got in touch with each other. She didn't have a whole lot of records or anything. She had the oral history. So she and I worked together to put together that oral history along with the records that I could find and put together the story on both of our families. It ended up being such a wonderful experience. RootsTech, the world's largest genealogical convention, invited us to give our talk, and we actually did it in a 2-part series on that. Once enslaved, once slaveholder, forging a forever family bond. And it went through a lot of the details that marked on how we found so much of our information. So this is a slide from our presentation, and we're showing the family connection that we had between myself and her. Now, as far as DNA, it would not show up on DNA between she and I, but it was just one because it was too distant. However, her DNA showed that she had more Welsh ancestry than I did. I had 10%, she had, I think, 17%. And then also just carrying down the Llewellyn name was pretty interesting. So we say we were 4th or 5th cousins because we were able to link it up to a William C. Llewellyn lineage. We couldn't say that he was actually the father of Sylvia. It could have been him, it could have been his father, it could have been one of his brothers. So that's why we say it was just based on the lineage. And you'll see there that her 2 times great-grandmother was a mulatto slave, so she was half white. So what we did was we took the family tree of my family and then also hers. Now you can see where William C. Llewellyn is right there, so that's my direct ancestor. Well, he had this brother named Jesse. Jesse had like 30 slaves. He was the one that lived in Marshall County, where I was at that museum there with that strange man. So Jesse, he actually was a judge there in the county, and very, very wealthy, and like I said, had over 30 slaves. One of his slaves was Sylvia Llewellyn. So that had an interesting tie there. Now, the gentleman, Sam Underwood, the one that locked the door behind us, well, he called me up and he says, Rhonda, I'm going through this old diary, this diary of this R.B. Alexander. He was really big in Marshall County, and he wrote down everything for about 5 years. And he goes, and I came across the Llewellyn name. He goes, I have no idea whether this is going to be any use to you or not. Let me read a little quote from it. Yankees were in town, carried off several Negroes, and also Judge Jesse Llewellyn. This was on September 10th of 1863. Well, guess what? This was a gold mine. This showed the exact day that Sylvia Llewellyn was set free. Do you know how big that is, especially for an African American? You don't get that kind of information. And this came from a man that was just a total stranger. That when he says, do you mind if I lock that door? If I said, hell no, I'm out of here, dude. You're giving me the creeps. Nope. Look what it gave. And it just kept getting more. So not only was it such a thrill for me, for Beverly, her brother, her cousins, they actually had something tangible where they could say. Since we had that date, we were also able to go into the Freedmen Bureau records, and we saw at a contraband camp there was an S. Llewellyn. Sure enough, that was Sylvia. Looking at it before, we wouldn't know whether S. Llewellyn was, Stephen or Sam or what. But we were able to put the other pieces together and definitely say, this is it. So now let's time travel back to 1990. All right, that was a while ago. And that was a time when we didn't have cell phones and we didn't have GPS. Now today we would consider not having your cell phone and not having GPS, that's an obstacle, right? Back in 1990, it didn't exist, so you didn't know that was an obstacle. You just made do. So my goal here was to find the Jackson Family Cemetery. So this was on my mother's side here, and I wanted to find the grave of my 4 times great-grandfather. This was the first descendant that first ancestor that I had found that was born in the 1700s, and that excited me. So I could not wait to find this grave. So I travel 600 miles in the middle of nowhere. The closest city was Shelbyville, Tennessee, and that was 30 minutes away. I'm sorry, 30 miles. Well, pretty much 30 minutes also. And then here we had Pokey Brown Lane. That's where the address of this was, Pokey Brown Lane. Okay. So I'm heading down Pokey Brown Lane, and I see this guy on a tractor. So since I know I'm on private property, I'm stopping. I'm going to talk to this guy to ask permission to be on this land. I mean, you could hear banjos playing in the background, okay? So it was way out in the boonies. And here, nobody knew where I was. So I asked the guy, I said, hey, this used to be my family land, way back in the middle 1800s. And I think that the cemetery is probably over in that clump of trees. Whenever you see, like, open fields, but then a clump of trees, there very well could be a cemetery there. So I just told him, I said, I just want to take some pictures. And he goes, Pokey Brown ain't around. I said, okay, well, I just wanted to take some pictures, not going to hurt anything, then I'm on my way. He goes, I said Pokey Brown ain't around. I said, well, do you know when he's going to be back? Nope. And so I'm thinking, I was about to ask him again, and I'm thinking, no, I'm done with him. So then I'm thinking, I drove 600 miles. This was my goal. Am I going to just turn around and go back? 600 miles. So I'm like, all right, what's my next thing? All right, so I'm thinking, well, I see this house, and I said, maybe Mrs. Pokey Brown's a little friendlier. So I go walk on over to that house. I knock on the door, and all of a sudden the door opens up. And this lady, I mean, her tongue is just going all over, has this crazed look in her face, and I was just like, whoa, hello. I said, told her who I was, what I was trying to do. And I mean, her tongue is still just going all over the place, and she's all jittery and stuff. So I'm just kind of backing up a little bit, not knowing what she's going to do. I'm on her property. Here I am, this stranger. And so I just like, I'm sorry, don't mean to bother you. I'll be on my way. So I start backing up. I'm not taking my eyes off of her. And I'm just backing up. And as I'm backing up, she starts coming down the stairs. She goes, "You want me to go with you?" And I'm like, nope, I'm good. You just have a great day. I'm like, okay. And I'm still walking backwards. I am not turning my back on this woman, because also, where's Mr. Pokey Brown? Don't know. So I've got a lot of red flags here going off. One, I have no phone. Nobody knows where I am. I'm in a very remote location on private property. This tractor guy over here isn't very friendly. Got this middle woman here in front of me. And where is Pokey Brown? Don't know when he's going to show up. And I start having the hair on the back of my neck start standing up. Ladies, you need to listen to those sort of cues. So what are some of my risks here? I'm starting to think about my personal safety. I could get shot. I could get robbed, kidnapped. I'm thinking, Rhonda, you've just been watching too many movies. You know, come on, that's kind of being, that could be false evidence appearing real, right? Well, what if I proceed to that cemetery anyway? How many miles did I drive? 600 miles, okay? So I start thinking, all right, what if I just go on the way out and I just stop in that cemetery, and I look down and I'm in shorts and a t-shirt, all that, and I'm like, what about those sticker bushes, possible snakes, chiggers? There are just too many things going on there. So my mission, I aborted it, even though I had driven 600 miles. Just too many red flags that gotta listen to your inside there telling you. So guess what? A few years later, on Find a Grave, somebody had already posted that, taken pictures of that grave. So I not only had my 3 times great-grandfather, I had my 4 times great-grandfather, and somebody also posted a picture of my 3 times great-grandfather. So didn't even have to go there. I actually checked just recently to see whether Pokey Brown and Mrs. Pokey Brown were still alive, and nope. So one of these days I may still go back there, see the next adventure there. At least I'll have a phone and GPS this time. So one of the things that I found really helpful was this risk assessment tool. And it was actually Beverly Llewellyn Bevel, the descendant of the slave, that told me about this, because she was in corporate America and she used this tool a lot. So what you do is you take your goal, or whatever your challenge is, okay, you write that down. You start thinking, you get 4 things that are really you consider to be obstacles. What is it that is just kind of making you hesitant of reaching that goal? And then you start finding 4 things of how you can counter that goal. Those restraining forces. So like with a stranger, everybody's gonna be a stranger. You were a stranger to me, and now I feel like we're friends. So you've actually been to both my talks, and I just love you for it. So everybody starts out as a stranger. So how do you combat that? Well, you're gonna build trust. You're gonna have communication. You're gonna spend some time. So that's kind of an easy one to do. And so what you're gonna do is also put a number to that, of how high or how low is that really an obstacle for you. And then weigh it. So here you can see my restraining forces is 32 and my driving forces are 26. Well, what am I going to do? I'm going to work on the easiest one. I'm going to try to build that trust. I've got documents that I can show that stranger that shows I'm just not out for whatever they're afraid of, that I'm out for money or whatever. You know, look, I'm legit. I spent all this time, I've got these documents. This is what I'm truly here for. So think about things like that you can just build that trust, and then the rest just kind of falls into place. So your mission, should you choose to accept it, what obstacle is in your way? Is it physical or is it psychological? Use that assess the risk versus reward, and you can do this to all aspects in life. And I've used it many, many times when I have difficult decisions to make. So you use that risk versus reward, and you just go for it. Thank you. So what I do is I unlock the past and I inspire the future. So go for those family adventures. You have no idea where it will lead you. So thank you. Does anybody have any questions? No questions? Okay. Well, thank you so much. I will be in the Hickory Landmarks booth along with Leslie Keller, and we've got all kinds of interesting things to help you discover your family history. So everyone's got a very interesting family history. So thank you very much. Enjoy the show.